I was walking around my neighborhood alone once, enjoying the night air and watching the stars. There was this little pond near my house with a wooded area that had trees, a bench, and a rope swing that went out over the water. I sat down on the bench to look at the stars, and I heard some rustling off to my right towards the trees. Bears were not uncommon where I'm from, so I took out my flashlight and shone it around over there. I didn't see anything, and it freaked me out, to be honest, so I kept my flashlight on and my senses aware. I did stay on the bench, however, to mull over my thoughts and watch the sky some more. Anyways, a few minutes passed and I heard nothing more, so I leaned back into the bench and started to relax a bit more. I'm staring up at the sky with my flashlight pointed downwards so as not to create any light pollution. That's when I noticed something in the tree in my peripheral vision. I couldn't tell what it was, but the branch was swaying slightly and the rustling noise was back too. I immediately sat up and stared at it, but I hadn't shown my flashlight at it yet in case of pissing off some huge bird or something else. I don't think I've ever been that scared, and I remember my heart was beating so fast and I could taste blood. I stared at it for what seemed like forever and it slowly stopped moving, but the shape was still there. Bears do not climb trees sometimes, so I was hesitant to run away in case that's what it was, so I just kept staring at it. After some time, I had built up my courage to shine my light at the tree. It was a man, an effing man in the tree, crouched in the tree like some naked monkey. He had no expression on his face, but his eyes were open really wide, and when my light landed on him, he started to move like he was going to come down. I didn't stick around to see if he did and started running for the hills. I ran to my house and around to the back door and locked myself in without looking back once. I went around and made sure every window and door was locked. I even checked the attic. I never go out alone anymore. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was not a night person at all and went to sleep rather quickly. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was on a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a few ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment, and that's when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. I decided he was most likely drunk, and I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and he was even wearing an old suit. He danced even closer until I could make out his face. His eyes were open very wide. His head was tilted back slightly, and therefore he was looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully white cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street, and as I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, the smile still wide on his lips. I was completely unnerved by this, and I started walking again but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move, and once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were also completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear he had moved fast. I was so shocked I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving towards me. He took giant exaggerated tiptoed steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind, and what I meant to ask was, "What the F do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone, but what came out was a whimper. Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me feel more afraid. He didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. Then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight, and then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile again, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk again. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, and he also didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see.